It is election day in Canada, and in Metro, voter turnout is reported to be heavy. But for many, choosing just where to mark their X has been difficult.
And also tonight, traffic tie-ups as the controversial widening of the Bedford Highway begins. Good evening, everyone. I'm Bruce Graham.
And I'm Laura Lee Langley. Well, no matter how you look at it, this election will be an historic one for Canada. There have never been so many parties to choose from, and never have the parties been so fundamentally different. As Andy Patterson reports, it's got voters confused and experts wondering what Canada will look like tomorrow.
The signs tell the story. 5 national parties in this election, the most ever. And it's got voters wondering who to vote for.
There's so many parties and so many candidates, but I have an idea that we have to have a change.
And it's not just the numbers of parties, but what the parties stand for that is so different in this election. In fact, never before in the history of Canada has there been so much potential to change the political map of this country. It is possible tomorrow that the official opposition in Canada could be the Bloc Québécois, a party dedicated to the breakup of the country. Or maybe it could be the Reform Party, the upstarts from the West. This Dalhousie history professor says they also could rip a tear in Canada's political fabric.
Reform is telling Quebec, like it or lump it. You know, you're in Canada exactly as Canada is today, or you're out. I mean, it's inviting Quebec separatism. So we have these two rising forces in Quebec and in the rest of Canada, which seem hell-bent on separation of Quebec.
But Michael Cross says the rise of the Reform and the Bloc are in part because Canadians are getting mean.
Canada has changed profoundly since the Conservatives came to power in 1984. We've seen many of the things that seem to define us come under attack, like social programs and Medicare. I think we've seen in the current recession a kind of meanness in our population that wasn't there before.
But no matter what the reason for the changes, Cross says there could be some big ones come tomorrow.
We may be seeing the death throes of the Conservative Party, the party which, after all, created this country in 1867. We certainly may well be seeing the death throes of the NDP, as we understand it. You know, someone is going to create a montage picture like the famous one of the Fathers of Confederation at Charlottetown in 1864, the Fathers of Deconfederation, Bouchard, Manning. Well, they'll have to bring Brian Mulroney out of retirement since he has a large responsibility in this deconfederation that's going on.
In Dartmouth, Andy Patterson, MITV.
Well, as Andy reported, this election has many in Metro scratching their heads, and some even worried about what will happen to Canada after today. We went to the streets of Metro to hear what people had to say.
Yeah, it is very different. Very different, lots of different choices, but if you think about it, you'll vote for the right party.
I think it's been pretty difficult. It's the main difficulty is deciding which one of the protest votes.
Very difficult election for the country as a whole. Not happy to think that we could be in a position where A, there could be 5 parties in Parliament, but B, the opposition could be formed by a group that is intent on breaking the country apart as I understand the country, perhaps not as they do.
What's the political map going to look like tomorrow?
Hard to say. Probably a minority.
Stay with MITV tonight. Throughout the programming this evening, we will bring you the latest results from your local riding in special Election 93 updates, and we will have a complete wrap-up during Metro at 11. Laura Lee?
Well, still with politics tonight, there's no shortage of candidates for the top administrative jobs in the Nova Scotia provincial government. Premier John Savage says more than 300 people have applied for 8 deputy minister jobs. The positions became vacant when Savage forced the resignations of their predecessors. At that time, the Premier said he was taking the politics out of the hiring process for deputy ministers who have traditionally been political appointees. But as Ross Lord reports tonight, some parts of the hiring process are the same as ever.
When Premier Savage lowered the boom on 9 deputy ministers left over from the previous government, he said it was time for some new administrators in the civil service.
There were directions that this government had set out that were not being followed in the way that we wanted them to be.
Now the government is looking for replacements.
We've had over 300 applications, and that we're very pleased with the caliber. I was talking briefly to the consultants, but we have no part in the process at this point. It's up to them to weed them out.
But Savage's promise to take the politics out of the hiring process only goes so far. Cabinet ministers, who traditionally appoint deputy ministers without job competitions, will still play a part.
They will have a hand towards the end when we get down to the selection. But the selection committee, which is primarily staff, will then meet with ministers towards the end.
Another thing that will not change is salary. Savage says the new deputies will be paid in the same range as their predecessors, some of whom were earning more than $100,000 a year. Premier Savage says he hopes to have all the new deputies hired and ready to go to work by early December. At Province House, Ross Lord, MITV.
The provincial labor minister says there are signs of a breakthrough in that simmering dispute between union and non-union contractors. Jay Abbas says the two sides are finally indicating that they might be willing to sit down and resolve their differences. Abbas hopes that's the case. It'll make his job easier.
My desire is that they negotiate a solution rather than having us as a government come in and try to run what is really their industry.
Abbas had set last Friday as the deadline for the two sides to get together. He says he's willing to wait a while longer. The dispute stems from a court decision which suggests unionized contractors should not hire non-union subcontractors.
In other news tonight, 6 locations in Metro are in the running to host the new blood plasma plant announced earlier this month by the Canadian Red Cross. And plant officials say all 4 municipalities have an equal chance of being chosen as home for the new $150 million facility. Nancy Shepard has the latest tonight.
This is what the new blood fractionation plant will look like. The Red Cross, along with its partner Miles Canada, made the announcement earlier this month that their new plant would be located here in Metro. Officials say the $150 million plant will bring 400 jobs into the Metro area and $1 billion in economic spin-offs, not to mention millions in tax revenue that will go to the municipality which hosts the facility. The Red Cross has narrowed down the site selection to 6 sites: the Ragged Lake Industrial Park and Bayers Lake in Halifax, Dartmouth's Burnside Industrial Park, and the Aerotech Business Park near the airport. There are 2 sites in Bedford, but the exact location has not been released. The Greater Halifax Economic Development Association represents all 4 municipalities. Its members are helping the Red Cross decide where to locate the facility. Chair of the association says the Red Cross is looking for specific items in a site.
Well, one of the things is, as I mentioned, is the availability of the right kinds of sewer treatment, water supply, power supply. The other things are convenience for their staff that will be working there. The other thing is profile, too. This is going to be a very large plant and a very prestigious plant.
Buckrow says so far the municipalities have been getting along and working together, not like in the past when in-house squabbling over incinerator site was known to everyone.
I think there's the realization that if we do it together, we can all benefit from it. This is going to be important to the total community.
Deputy Mayor of Halifax, Walter Fitzgerald, says Ragged Lake is the ideal place to locate the facility because of the high-tech business nature of the park. Fitzgerald says although every municipality is offering 200,000 square feet for $1, he says they are all competing on physical aspects. He says no one is squabbling over the deal.
The bottom line is that this is too big a project to lose. And the first criteria was that the municipalities get together. And I think when you carry a big stick of like $150 million and 400 jobs, you don't want it to go out of the province, and you want it in this area.
Buckrow says the Red Cross should decide which site by December 15th. In Metro, Nancy Shepard, MITV.
Well, meantime, the controversy continues to follow the blood plant project. Some groups say the plant should not be built until after the completion of a federal inquiry into the distribution of blood products during the 1980s.
Well, in other news tonight, Sackville RCMP are ready to lay murder charges in the death of an inmate at the Halifax County Correctional Center. Police say the suspect will appear in Bedford court tomorrow, charged with first-degree murder. On October the 1st, 37-year-old Donald William Finlay of Mosier River was killed in D Block at the jail. Finlay was serving an intermittent sentence on weekends for dangerous driving. He was in the center for only 90 minutes when he was found murdered. Friends of the victim allege his death was the result of a family feud in the community of Mosier River. Police say the suspect has been in custody since the murder almost a month ago. They have delayed laying charges several times without explanation.
We are going to be laying first-degree murder charges against the suspect who is in custody in the Correctional Center and has been since the occurrence took place.
The suspect's name cannot be released until he appears in court tomorrow. Police would not confirm or deny the accused knew Finlay or whether he is from the Mosier River area. And Sackville RCMP are looking for suspects involved in a rock-throwing incident along Highway 101 over the weekend. Police say a group of teenagers are throwing rocks and other objects at passing cars on Highway 101 near the Lucasville Road overpass. Police say the young people apparently hide in ditches along the roadside and throw rocks and apples onto the road. No injuries have been reported so far, but Constable Brian Carter says the practice is dangerous. Someone could get killed, and those involved could face criminal charges.
End of the scale on it, if, for example, they throw something at a vehicle and it injures or kills the individual, or as a result of their action it kills the individual, they can be charged with criminal negligence causing bodily harm or criminal negligence causing death. Now, causing death, criminal negligence causing death could give a penalty of life imprisonment, and they could get 10 years for criminal negligence causing bodily harm. So it's very, very
Carter says if police catch anyone throwing rocks or anything else on the highway, they could be charged with dangerous, damaging property, rather. Suspects could also face a fine.
Well, some nicer news now. I understand that Captain Eli, that well-known waterfront figure, is back home today.
Yes, you may recall we did the story last week. The life-size wooden carving has been missing since Thanksgiving Monday, actually, when it was stolen from Captain Eli's East Coast Charter Company at Cable Wharf in Halifax. Last week, the statue's owner, Eli Returns, appealing to the thieves to bring the statue back and no questions would be asked. After media reports about the statue's disappearance, police received a tip about its location, and they found Captain Eli in a storage room at an apartment building on Williams Lake Road in Spryfield. Richard says he's glad the carving is back. He says from now on it's going to be chained down, which is, after all, it's worth about $3,000. Police are investigating several leads in the case. And still ahead tonight, dealing with cable television and those who steal the signals.
And the widening of the Bedford Highway begins. Get ready for some traffic tie-ups.
Just what we need.
Yeah. Well, you come in from Dartmouth, so you don't often have to deal with the traffic tie-ups on the Bedford Highway in the morning, for sure. But you've experienced them.
Sure.
Motorists traveling the Bedford Highway better prepare themselves for some more traffic tie-ups.
Yeah, exactly. Crews have actually started work widening the busy artery into Halifax, and construction likely will not be finished until the end of next summer. But as Michelle Skierman tells us tonight, not everyone is happy about the project.
Traffic jams might become a regular thing on the Bedford Highway. The long and controversial widening project has finally begun. When completed next summer, this stretch of road between Bayview and Sherbrooke will be extended to 4 lanes. Residents who live close to the highway have had some of their land expropriated, and when the project is finally completed, the roadway will literally run through their backyards. But the alderman for the area says expropriating the homeowner's land was the only choice.
The other side is the railway tracks, which is CN, which was federally owned, and we are not permitted to expropriate or take land from the federal government unless they're willing to give it. And it's my recollection that if we wanted to go into that area, it would cost $10 million just to take one land space for one track.
The business district between Sherbrooke and Tremont Drive will be widened to include 2 traveling lanes and 1 turning lane. But some businesses along the strip aren't welcoming the changes.
Major concern for people on the eastern side of the highway is encroachment on their property as far as access to their properties and the areas in front of their properties that's been used for the last while for parking.
Despite those concerns, Middleton says he generally thinks the widening will help the commercial area. He says the turning lane particularly will make it easier for customers to access business outlets. Mount St. Vincent University has also been one of the key players in the widening controversy. The university spoke out when the city planned to cut down some of its trees along the Bedford Highway, but it and the city came to a compromise.
We are only going to lose 3 of our trees. Initially, we were thinking that we might lose up to 40 of our trees. So I think we feel somewhat as though that's a definite gain for us, although, of course, we are very disappointed to lose any of them. However, we do have a replanting plan in place for the spring, and the trees that we are going to lose, we're going to replace.
On the Bedford Highway, Michelle Skierman, MITV.
And the first phase of that project is costing the province and the city $8 million. The second phase of the project will extend to Kearney Lake Road. It has been approved by City Council, but the cost-sharing arrangement with the province has yet to be worked out.
Partisan bickering has broken out on a legislature committee reviewing the financial problems of the Bedford Waterfront Development Corporation. The Bedford MLA, Liberal Francine Cosman, says it might be worth having Bedford Mayor Peter Kelly appear on the Public Accounts Committee to explain his role on the Waterfront Corporation. But the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, Tory John Leaf, questions Cosman's motives because she ran against Kelly in the provincial election. Cosman says John Leaf is out of line.
It's strictly in the public interest. It's anyone who knows my style would never subscribe to the idea that it's a mischief-making search. I mean, it isn't. So
Kelly's critics say he was in a conflict of interest in his role with the Waterfront Development Corporation. They say he was a member of Bedford Town Council and an employee of the Provincial Department of Economic Development when the two agencies were approving financial help for the Waterfront Corporation. Kelly says it's much ado about nothing.
Well, Metro cable companies say the days of stealing pay television from local stations may soon be over. Access Cable of Dartmouth and Halifax Cable say they will soon begin using a new digital technology that will shut out the illegal users. Michael Chisholm reports.
If you don't own a decoder, this is what paid television looks like on most TV sets. To unscramble these channels, people buy specialized equipment from cable companies and pay the extra monthly charge. But some viewers are getting the channel for free by using illegal decoders they make themselves.
We're very concerned about theft of basic service in pay TV because in a final analysis, the cost of doing business goes up and therefore the cost of the retail product to the consumer goes up.
Barnes says the program pirates make their own homemade devices to unscramble the signal. But now, cable companies are beginning to test a new digital video system that makes it virtually impossible for illegal users to decode the signal.
In order to decode this digital information, you need equipment that is currently not easily accessible and also far more sophisticated than what's currently being used.
Barnes says 2 Ontario cable companies launched a recent campaign encouraging consumers to turn in people using illegal pay TV equipment. It is not a national campaign, and Metro companies have nothing to do with it. However, Barnes says both Access and Halifax Cable have a special constable who looks for illegal pay TV users. And the constable is always looking out for people who receive the basic cable signal in their homes without paying the monthly fee. In Dartmouth, Michael Chisholm, MITV.
All right, well, stay with us now. We have more coming up.
Duane tells us about the weather, but first she introduces us to a charming new dance troupe. An enchanting dance theater production is now touring the province.
It's the Halifax Dance Young Company, and they are presenting the well-loved children's fable, The Sorcerers Apprentice. Duane Lowe caught the company as they prepared for their tour and brings us the magic behind The Sorcerers Apprentice.
Holly Crooks is creating her own style of magic. Crooks is the wardrobe mistress for Halifax Dance, and she uses her imagination and some unlikely materials to create wonderful costumes. In her hands, a few meters of silk become an enchanting magician's cloak. Burlap, paint, wire, and string are transformed into a costume that will turn a dancer into a tree. In fact, it was the tree creatures that presented the biggest challenge.
We also not only had to figure out how to build them that they look like logs,
but how to create a costume that was danceable, something that wasn't too heavy, that could be moved around in, and something that was safe for the dancers too. I'll show you these. In the illustration, the hand pieces for the log creatures were much, much longer, but we found that they weren't safe for the dancers to dance in because of the danger of whacking each other with these.
The tree creatures and other costumes were created by Holly Crooks for the upcoming tour of the Sorcerer's Apprentice.
The Sorcerer's Apprentice took 2 months of 12 to 14-hour days. It was a very intensive period of work. Some of the work I did in collaboration with Shelley Wallace from Just in Time Theatre. She created the masks. You see some of the masks here, and some of the headpieces.